Da, da, da. Dun, 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 dun. That's looking nice. There. That. There we go. Very good. Very good. Ah. Oh, that thing. Oh, it's nothing at all. It's just our 1 million subscriber plaque from YouTube. I just thought I'd put it there. You know, where else am I going to leave it? Anyway, welcome to the Fully Charged podcast, and a very, very, I think this is a huge privilege for someone of my years to be able to do this, to talk to these people that I meet on the Fully Charged podcast. It's absolutely a real, genuine privilege. And this week is definitely no exception. This is a really, really big, genuine privilege. I spoke to Dr. Hannah Ritchie, who is the senior researcher and the head of research at Our World in Data. And if you haven't ever seen Our World in Data, I will put links in this podcast for this website. It is just amazing. It's fascinating, and it's a time sink beyond all time sinks. And I'm like, don't look at Our World in Data, do something else. Anyway, amazing. She's an amazing young woman, absolutely incredible. This was a real privilege to talk to her, and I'm desperate to get her back on the show because she is so fascinating, and the work she's doing is really, really interesting. So it's not just, it's very much not just energy. So she focuses on long-term development for food supply, agriculture, energy, and the environment, and their compatibility with global development. So a really big global view of what is happening in the world, and how things are changing, and the speed that things are changing at. And I think, and the new technologies that are emerging out of this, I don't know if you could really call it an industrial revolution, but it's definitely a big sea change in the way we operate on the planet. And so it is a huge privilege to chat with her. I think I'll let her do the talking because she's far more interesting than me. And I do only apologize now that I got a little bit carried away and excited just because I love the work she's doing so much. So I might talk a little bit too much. Just fast forward through my bits and listen to Hannah because she's really extraordinary. But that's it. So, do the subscribe thing, please. Do tell your friends about this podcast. Do keep listening because there's some other wonderful people who are coming up shortly. But now, for now, please welcome to the Fully Charged podcast, Dr. Hannah Ritchie. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today. That I have to say that I'm a little bit overexcited about this, talking to you, just because of what you do. And I just want to start out, before I wax lyrical about Our World in Data, can you explain just briefly how you got to do what you're doing now? Because you're also alarmingly young. I'm allowed to say that because my son is the same age as you. So from my point of view, it's a bit of a shock because it feels like, to me, it feels like 6 months ago you were a toddler, because that's what it feels like when I see him, and he's now the same age as you. Anyway, how did you, I know that you were clever and you did homework at school and you went to university. It's really how you got into data, what it was that attracted you to that specific area of science.
I mean, on the topic of being young, I'm a bit starstruck because I remember you from Scrap Heap Challenge days.
Right.
I'd watch you with my dad as a kid, so I'm also starstruck here.
Well, you'll get over that really quickly because you realise what an idiot I am. So it's fine.
But yeah, in terms of my background, so my background's very much environmental science. So my degrees were environmental science. I did a master's in carbon management. I did a PhD, all very focused on environmental topics. And I guess data was a part of it, just as it is for most sciences. But I didn't really kind of dig into data as a specific topic or almost career approach until I started working at Our World in Data. And I think that kind of emerged from, in some sense, I'd been almost too close to the environmental stuff, really getting into the weeds of the really specifics of it. And I think part of that kind of tainted my vision a little bit of where we were going, were we making progress? And I think you can only really understand these things if you really step back and look at the big picture. And to understand the big picture, you need to look at data. Like headlines are okay, stories are okay, and they're important, but you can't understand how these issues are going globally until you step back and look at the data. And I think that kind of like, I got this kind of wow moment of like, whoa, I feel like I have a much clearer vision just by looking and studying the data, that I kind of started to get obsessed. And now every time I approach a problem, I'm thinking like, give me the data so I can have a look and understand it better.
Right. Because I mean, that is the focus of our show is more on sort of energy and transport, I suppose. But actually, as soon as I read anything about you, I mean, one of the great ones I thought was so counterintuitive, and I know we all do it. So, and I've done it this morning. I looked at some beans in a supermarket and went, I'm not buying those because they're from Kenya, which in some ways I did feel bad about it, because I thought, well, there's a farmer in Kenya that makes his living off these, or her living off growing these beans, and I'm not buying them out of some weird, I should buy more local food. And that I heard an interview with you about that, and how, having a lump of beef from the farm next door to your house is more carbon intensive than importing tofu from Australia or something. It was like the most extreme example.
Yeah. No, I think we've all got these like intuitions, and like often these intuitions make sense. Like the intuition that I know that transporting stuff uses energy and emits CO2. Therefore, if it's coming a long way, then obviously it's going to have a high carbon footprint. So intuitively that makes sense. But you only really understand it when you look at the data and you realize that, okay, transport does emit some CO2, but that's really, really tiny compared to the amount that farming emits, like actually producing the food in the first place. And they are producing beef or other meat products has a much higher carbon footprint than producing plant-based foods. And that totally dwarfs the transport emissions that you get, regardless. It's often if it's coming by ship, especially, it just totally dwarfs it. But you don't understand that till you look at the data. So like, I love these wow moments of like, whoa, like my kind of perspective has been flipped upside down.
Because that is, I mean, my children grew up in effectively a vegetarian as opposed to vegan household, because my daughter just didn't eat meat. So it was a really easy decision. We eventually all stopped. But then we do live near a farm. So our neighbours have cows. And my wife loves meat. So she's definitely eaten some very high carbon cow. Because I've never liked beef. So that was never a problem for me. But it is such that alone is a contentious debate, which we've touched on occasionally in the show, but I just got, it's not our area really. But what it shows is that there is a sort of vision, which we've all got. I've got it, where you go, oh, there's the beans. I don't want to get them. Well, hang on, look at that. Oh, it's that scale of it. And I just, we've just put out an episode about a grid level battery, a huge Tesla power pack battery that's in near Hull, in the north of England, and it's interesting because it's a grid balancing battery. It doesn't power houses for 24 hours. It doesn't do all it's never meant to. But it's driven. I have to say, I'm going to be sexist. Men livid with fury that anyone would dare to suggest that a battery, even if it's a big one, can run the country. There's never any hint of that in the thing, but it's that sort of assumption that what I'm trying to get to is the all or nothing solution.
Yeah.
What we need a battery that can run this country for 4 weeks. This is what someone's demanding, which is like hundreds of terawatt hours. And if you don't have that, then nothing will work. It's that kind of, well, hang on. Because if it's not windy in Cornwall, it probably is around the Isle of Skye or Norway or anyway.
I feel like you see I think you see that, like, I'm very much in the climate space, but I think you see this a lot where it's either the solution has to fix every single problem at one time or people disregard it. And the point is we need this wide combination of solutions, and that's how we get there.
But then, so one of the, because it's also that the habit which I am very aware when other people do it, and I'm less aware when I do it, which is cherry picking data. So that might, because I'm presuming that you're getting feedback from journalists and people who use your resources, all the time. And and I mean, I could look through your data analysis and go, this proves beyond doubt that electric cars are just will save the world, which is nonsense. We know they won't. But we can sort of argue that they're a bit better than the combustion cars we use now. I mean, that's really as far as I'm ever prepared to go with electric vehicles.
Yeah, but I think also like a key part of what we do is like we're deliberately not prescriptive about solutions. Like we're never telling people this is what we should do. We're trying to present the data in a way that people can understand, okay, this is the situation. If we did this, this would happen. Yeah. And then it's up to everyone else to work out, is that actually the path we want to take? Is that the decision we want to make? Yeah. But we're never telling people this is what you should do. But we're trying to present the data in an impartial, objective way to basically inform better decisions.
But I mean, that in itself is a real challenge in the current climate, because I can't remember it being... I suppose there weren't alternatives. I'm going back way before you were born to when I knew some hippies that built a wind turbine on a farm in Wales. And like there was no one around going, I hate wind turbines, because no one had an opinion about them because they didn't. I mean, that one technically you could argue worked on a very, very crude level, and it charged up some old truck batteries in the kitchen of the house. Because there was no electricity at the house. That's why they did it. They didn't do it to be green. They did it because they didn't have any electricity. Right. You know, it was a long time ago. But I did, you know, there wasn't that sort of angry argument between, I don't even know what it's between, you know, the people who just hate. I've just been I've been receiving a lot of hate recently on Twitter, which I'm trying not to use anymore. You know, about that, you know, just won't ever work, and it's a myth, and we're forcing poor people into fuel poverty by insisting that they all have solar panels. You know, it's this kind of you may not be aware of it, but it's really
I get
horrible.
It as well. And I think and I think so that like striking that balance is really important for us. I think we often know that, or think we're doing a good job if we actually often will see people on both sides using our data to debate the same thing.
That's a good sign.
I think a good sign is if you're getting like, if people on both sides are like not really 100% happy, then probably you feel like you've got the balance right. Like if you get attacked from both sides, you kind of feel okay.
You're doing something really good. But then there's some really good data about, I mean, because I've just written reams of notes, which I just wanted you to reflect on. But then, the changes in the world, when you look at the global map and then how much energy is coming from renewables, how much coal is being burnt, generally, one thing I noticed straight away was Africa is generally hashed out and blank, or the whole sort of sub-Saharan Africa. Is that because you don't know, or because there is no grids and there is no power generation, and I don't know what that seems to be a common theme.
Yeah, generally the data providers that we rely on, often it's just difficult to get high quality data across many low income countries. Because often they are the kind of the network you'd need to gather really good data is not there. Another reason is just that often sadly energy consumption in those countries is so low, like it hardly even registers, which is like a big part of the problem. Like, although my background is environmental science, like what we try to do at our own data is present the picture across what we frame as the world's largest problems. And that's like this really broad combination of one, yes, we need to tackle our environmental problems and stop climate change, but also like there's really severe socioeconomic problems across the world. So it's how we do both at the same time. Like, how do we combat climate change? We're also bringing everyone up to a good standard of living. And for many countries in the world, like energy consumption is so incredibly low.
Yes. And it's also that thing of, which I've had discussions with African people on sort of post-lockdown conferences online about electric vehicles in Africa and about renewable energy in Africa. And there is definitely an argument that I'm hearing, and I'm remaining neutral on it, in that the cost of now today installing even a coal burning power plant near the coast and running electricity cabling, and pylons and substations out, into a country like Ghana or Kenya or that is so expensive that it's just, they've tried it here and there and it hasn't really worked. Whereas the idea of installing solar locally, and the only example I have is a friend of mine who's an architect who's helped build a hospital in rural Kenya, that was in where there's no grid connection, and they've just made it a grid island standalone power plant with huge amounts of solar and batteries. So it's done as an experiment. Well, it powers the local housing as well as the hospital and all the compound that the hospital's in. And that was affordable and sustainable. And I don't know whether that is something you've looked at, is do we go for gas and nuclear in Africa?
Right.
With all the concomitant costs and infrastructure that's needed? Or is it better to miss that? Like in a way like cell phones have. A lot of people talk about that kind of combination where putting in copper wires and cell phones are just never going to happen.
Yeah, so there's the effect that they call leapfrogging, whereas you basically just completely leapfrog a technology. So many people just leapfrog the landline. And the suggestion is that you could just like almost leapfrog coal and fossil fuels. I think just the key point there is cost. Like there's often been this, not by everyone, but this slight hypocrisy, often by rich countries of like, poorer countries, you can't develop in the same way we've developed by burning fossil fuels. And the climate argument there is quite valid, but it's not acceptable in a world when there's energy poverty. Yeah. But the key there is that we basically want to have renewables way, way cheaper than fossil fuels. And then you actually don't even need to use the climate argument because it's just people will do it anyway because it's just economically the best option. Yeah. And I think that's very, very feasible. Like so if you look at the price of different energy sources over time, like fossil fuels generally have been quite constant. Like, you get fluctuations in oil markets and stuff, but over time, like the technology, like not very large price changes, especially for coal. And what you've seen for renewables is just these like plummeting costs especially over the last decade, where they're just basically tearing right past coal. So if you imagine coal is just this like flat line, price is not really falling, like the potential is that like renewables are just going to go blow way past it and undercut it in price. And that's really the hope, is that poorer countries will not have to forego energy because they're trying to cut back on their carbon emissions, because that would be unfair. Basically, they get both at the same time. It gives them energy way, way cheaper, and they don't need to go through the really fossil fuel rich development pathway that we went through.
Yeah. And also, in many cases, having to import it. I mean, that's an argument that does seem to hold sway when I've done public events about energy and transport. If you say, I don't want our country to be reliant on expensive, toxic imported fossil fuel, that does cut across quite a big swathe of political opinion, which is because it's kind of going, I mean, we've really experienced that recently, what the impact that has. It was very much underlined by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, that's changed things.
That's also like another case of, on these issues, like trying to meet people where they are. So like some people are just not convinced by the climate debate, but there are many other reasons why you'd want to do that. And if their core reason is energy security, then okay, like we're all going then for the same goal. We just have different reasons for pursuing it.
Yeah. But there was a great one which I loved, which was how about land use and how much land you use, because that's a common argument against solar farms, which I kind of sympathize with. We have some solar farms around here in a rural area. There's a massive field that has like grass growing in it. Yeah. That has now massive solar array. And in some cases, I've seen it where it does work, where you would never be able to grow anything on that land. So it's just got sheep grazing. But then I don't know how damaging sheep are. We'll get to that later on. But the way you set that out was, if you've got a coal burning power plant, it doesn't take up much land in terms of its total use, but it uses a lot of land to get the coal. Yeah. Which I hadn't even thought about. That was one of those little quirks.
Yeah, I think that's another case where like you don't understand it till you look at the data. And often people make these arguments about solar and they'll just put up a picture of like a big field with solar panels. And you've got no context. Is that a big area? Like how many houses is that powering? So you only get that context if you look at the data. And then if you look at the data, basically once you include like the land needed for the mining and the transport of the materials and stuff, solar just doesn't really use more land than coal. if anything, if you like utilize it well, so you put it on roofs, like there's ways where you can kind of combine it with farming. You could actually potentially use less land than you would use for coal.
Yeah. Well, there's been a law passed in France literally 2 weeks ago, which stipulates any car park with over 80 spaces has to be covered in solar panels, which is like, yes. Why haven't we done that 10 years ago?
Yeah.
What's holding you back?
Yeah.
And that, I'm arguing very strongly for that to happen here, because that land is already stuffed. You're not going to grow carrots on a car park. I mean, why do we need the car park? I think should be the first argument. Can we get around not having the car park? Right. But if we've got it, then at least cover that in solar. Yeah. But that was, and also all the roofs. I mean, I think that's the thing. There's a couple of journeys we've done where we've actually filmed it, where you're driving past massive warehouses with no solar panels on the roof, and then you go past a field. I know why they put them there. It's investment banks and hedge funds. It's cheap. Mm-hmm. That's why you put it in a field, because it's much cheaper and you make more money out of it. But it should be on the roof of the damn ugly Amazon distribution center. But then, so have you got any of this to hand? Like how much of our current electricity, I'm going to stick with electricity, comes from renewables globally? I mean, is there an accepted figure for that, or?
So globally, our electricity, so if you just include solar and wind, it's around 10%. So 10%. Right. But if you include like low carbon electricity as a whole, so that would include hydropower, that would include nuclear power. Yeah. It's just under 40%. So just under 40% of the world's electricity comes from low carbon sources.
Low carbon sources. And that is, I'm guessing, other than nuclear, growing the fastest as well. I mean, there's more of it being installed.
Yeah, by far. So if you look at basically new electricity capacity that's going online, it's like nearly always solar and wind these days.
Right. I mean, because I'm very not opposed to nuclear, other than economically. I mean, that's my argument, but I don't know. I mean, because there's all these, I now want to spend 5 hours burying myself in our world in data. Have you done graphs or breakdowns of the cost of nuclear? Because it has. Okay, here's a question: has nuclear power got cheaper since I was a kid? Because a lot of your figures start from 1966, when I was 10. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good. It's a really good metric for me. I can go, okay, that's what's happened since I was 10.
So the nuclear story and prices is like a little bit complicated, and also because globally, there's just been a big shift in nuclear. So like it used to be Europe and the US were like very heavily invested in nuclear. Yeah. And then basically they've not really, there's a few have come online, but in the last few decades, they've basically built no nuclear whatsoever. Yeah. And that's now shifted. So many Asian countries are now building their own nuclear plants. In terms of prices, I mean, so what happens with technologies is that it's what we would call the learning curve. So the more and more you build of the technology, you learn more about it, you learn how to make it cheaper, etc. So that's why we've seen this dramatic decline in solar prices or battery prices. For nuclear, because we haven't been building the same plants over and over, we haven't really had that learning. So actually the prices have not really changed much over time.
Right. No, it has, yes. I mean, it is... it's very difficult I find it very difficult to argue for building. I don't think we should get rid of the stuff we got now. We should keep using it while it works. But it is those things that another thing that I've come across more recently, and that's from talking to engineers who work in the national grid and who have to control these things, is I just assume there's a gas turbine power generator, it's on or off because we need it, so let's turn it on. It's not, coal, those things, you turn them on when you need them. And nuclear, you can't. As one nuclear engineer genuinely said to me, works at Sellafield, he said, there's 2 states for a nuclear power plant. Either it's working 100%, which it does all the time anyway, and it's not a problem, Robert, and don't make a fuss, or you're trying to overtake me as I'm running away from it.
Right. Yeah.
And he's quite an old guy. I thought, well, I could probably just about overtake him, but it would be difficult. But then I find out that, as it's not unexpected, I just hadn't thought about it. You have to, a gas turbine power generator is under enormous pressure. What are you doing in it? You're heating water to enormous temperatures, pumping it through pipes, turning turbines, they have to be maintained, and they go offline for months at a time, not a couple of hours. And I didn't know that until more recently.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on nuclear is very similar. Like, I think it's actually quite terrible when we take existing nuclear plants offline, especially when you're like growing renewables at the same time, because then you're basically replacing some of the amazing growth you've had in renewables. You're just replacing another low carbon source when you could have replaced coal or gas or fossil fuels. So it doesn't make sense to take them offline.
So we're basically talking about Germany. So I think we should be
we're talking about Germany. And I wrote an article in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago on this, and it was not that complimentary of that strategy.
Yeah. Atomkraft 9 Danker. It's my generation that in Germany, all of the people I know well in Germany were very opposed to nuclear, really because of Chernobyl. I mean, that was what finally turned the kind of general population against it, because that isn't that far from them. And I was on a bike ride when Chernobyl went ballistic, and I know it wasn't that, but it felt like the rain was hot. It wasn't. It was just that I was freaking out because the wind was like, there was a lot of alarm in the news at the time, because this, and of course the Soviet Union, as it was then, denied anything was wrong for days and days and days. I mean, we know the whole story now, but I mean, that's my argument always been: nuclear power is incredibly safe. If you look at all the nuclear power plants around the world, how long they've been running, it's been incredibly safe and reliable unless it goes wrong. Yeah. And when it goes wrong, it is catastrophically horrendous.
It can be catastrophic, but even if you look at Fukushima, so Fukushima got hit by the region got hit by one of the largest earthquakes it's had, got hit by a massive tsunami. Yeah. No one died in Fukushima. No. And so what we have in our own data is we basically look at how many deaths per unit of energy across different sources, and nuclear is like way down the bottom with renewables. I think my core point there is, if you're arguing like renewables and nuclear are both very, very safe, if you're arguing between them on the basis of safety, like, you're missing the bigger picture. The point is, coal, oil, gas kill millions of people every year from air pollution, and that's what the enemy, so-called enemy, is. It's not one another.
No, absolutely, I'm with you 100%. I can't agree more. And I mean, that is the battle that we are fighting in that sense. Is, I mean, I'm intrigued to hear your take on this, but the kind of underlying, I don't want to call it philosophy because that sounds too grand, but sort of the theme that we're trying to point at is that we stop burning stuff, which is the most stupid thing. I'm under no illusions about how impossible that is to achieve. Even in 1,000 years, with the most amazing technologies we can't even imagine, I still think there'll be a bit of burning going on. But as a general aim for the human race, it does strike me as being extremely sensible. And it really helps you look at different technologies that are emerging and going, well, that's good. I like that. It's better than the stuff we use now, but it is still burning stuff. So e-fuels, hydrogen, burning hydrogen in a combustion engine. You're going, that it's sort of become the golden rule for us. And I don't know if there's if you have an opinion on that, or if there's some way of analysing whether that is. Are we burning less? Here's a question that you might be able to. Are we burning less now as a human race on the planet than we were 10 years ago?
Than we were 10 years ago? No.
I think we're burning more, aren't we?
We're still burning more. Yeah, I think we're getting very close to the peak. Right. I think in the next few years that will peak and it will come down, but relative to 10 years ago, it's still more. But I think as a general principle, like, I fully agree. I've recently written a book, which is coming out, and like one of the chapters is specifically on air pollution, and like that's basically the tagline is like, if we want to stop, we just need to stop burning stuff. As soon as you burn stuff, you create co-products that you don't want. So the simple thing is just stop burning stuff.
Yeah. You must plug your book. When's your book coming out, and what's it called?
It's coming out next January.
All right.
So it's a while away, but it is available for pre-order. It's called Not the End of the World. And it's this optimistic, data-driven look. So it's like basically it's my view of the world based on the data on how we tackle environmental problems. So I go through each of our environmental problems chapter by chapter. So like climate, air pollution, biodiversity, deforestation, like chapter by chapter, and look at where we are, how we got here, where we are today, and then what we need to do next to solve these problems.
Right. And that's quite intriguing. Then. So you are, because you are party and have access to way more data and information than the average Joe, and certainly me. And therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if you said, "I'm so depressed, I'm literally going to give up and grow mushrooms in a cave and carry a gun like the woman in the Terminator." You sound that if you can kind of collate all that information and remain optimistic, then that kind of cheers me up a bit, because there are days when I get up and I go, "Why have I wasted my time arguing this for the last 13 years? It's absolutely pointless. Everything's just got worse, on a bad day."
Yeah, but I think my perspective on that has changed, and it's changed basically because of the data. So if I go back to when I was finishing uni, like maybe 7 years ago or so, like I was very pessimistic. And that's because I wasn't really looking at the data. All I was looking at was basically the headlines, and that's how I thought I would stay informed. And I think that gives you a very negative bias. But actually, when you look at the data, and especially data in only the last few years, so like if you look at the last 5 years, for example, just the pace of change is now so rapid that I find it hard to not be optimistic.
Right. Oh, that's good. That is very good. Because because I'm just sort of waiting, really. I just want to live long enough to see the beginning of the shift that you can really register, i.e., like last year, we burnt more than we've burnt this year, but we've actually produced more energy this year. That moment, because obviously, one of the arguments about this country is, when I was a kid, I think it was about 70% of our electricity was from burning coal. And today it's like less than one. Occasionally we do, but it's very, very low. But also, when I was a kid, we made loads of stuff in this country. We were a huge manufacturer of, things like rail tracks, trains, bridges, aeroplanes, cars. We made all that stuff here. Well, we've shipped all that to China, where they burn coal.
But I think that's another also big misconception. Yeah, I've got some good news on that. So like it's right if you look at like CO2 emissions in the UK over the last few decades, like they've basically halved. Like there's been a really rapid plummet. And like a lot of that has been this rapid decline in coal production. And the argument is always, and I agree, and like I would have made this argument as well, is that like, okay, the UK is actually probably just carrying itself on. Like there's no way it's actually reduced emissions. It's just like exported them and it's been like, okay, it's someone else's problem. But we can correct for that like offshoring. So we can calculate what would the UK's emissions be based on the fact that not only looking at how much we produce in this country, but all of the goods that we import. Like basically we're saying, okay, we're also going to add all of these emissions of the stuff we import from China or India or Bangladesh. And when you do that, emissions are higher than our domestic emissions because we are importing stuff. But we still see this dramatic decline over the last few decades. So it's not that we're just offshoring them. That's a little bit of the story, but we're still rapidly reducing emissions.
I'm now projecting, and correct me, please, but I'm just thinking that mechanical efficiency since I was born has improved enormously. So the press that would have pressed the bonnet of a Mini when I was a kid would use more energy than a press that's in a factory now. And that's just one example. And the way the steel comes from would be more efficiently made and how it's shipped. Mm-hmm. So, and is that what am I correct in those assumptions that in fact the manufacturing processes are less energy demanding now than they would have been 50 plus, all right, 60 years ago? I have to be honest about my age.
Yeah, so you can reduce your emissions in two ways. One, you can reduce the amount of energy you're using, and as you say, that's improving the efficiency. Or you can decarbonize your energy supply, so reduce the amount of CO2 you emit per unit of energy. And actually, both of those have massively improved over the last few decades. So both levers are pulling in the right direction. So you're getting that combined effect of the processes are more efficient, and the underlying energy we're using to power them is also getting cleaner.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's the big argument really for electric cars is that, always the argument of, well, it's powered, it's used more in America. Your damn Tesla's powered by coal.
Right.
But it's still cleaner.
Yeah.
Isn't it, per mile or per kilometre?
Yeah.
But also it doesn't have to be powered by coal. I mean, when it was an American that explained the term fuel agnostic to me, is that an electric car works with electricity from anything. Doesn't care where it comes from. If it's electricity, it'll work. Whereas a combustion engine, not quite the same. But now that is very encouraging. I want to ask you other ones that I think, okay, so what about, have you done shipping oil? So in my weird career, I've been on 2 very large ships. One was a container ship and one was an oil tanker. And this is way before Fully Charged Show. This was how do they do it? I don't think it's on YouTube, but there's there was a long-running TV series, and all I can remember from talking to the captains, and this program was so not about a critique of the oil industry, anything but the oil tanker was just massive. It was just so big, this was just in a dock. It was being unloaded in Pembrokeshire. And I asked how much fuel it used. It was one of the long list of questions. And it was, they don't measure it in gallons, they measure it in tons. I can't remember what it was, but it was a lot. All I can remember is it was more than a way bigger ship that was a container ship. Because the oil tanker, when it's full, is incredibly heavy and it sits really low so it's got to push more water out of the way. I don't know if you know, and it is about 40%, from what I understand, about 40% of global shipping is moving crude oil. Does that strike you as a plausible figure? I'm asking you these really difficult questions. Very unfair.
No, it's I mean, I don't have the numbers to hand. I mean, it doesn't seem impossible to me that would be the amount. I think there again, I always just try to think about the data and put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And what just pops out for me is that when it comes to transport emissions, the vast majority come from roads.
From ground transport.
From
really?
ground transport.
Wow.
And it's not that we don't need to address. We always need to address shipping and aviation and stuff. But I think we often get pulled in so many different directions when there's often, you can get 80% of the way there by focusing on the big chunks. I often see this a lot. Even when people think about their personal carbon footprint, people can get really obsessive about trying to totally optimize absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that's stressful, or a lot of people just don't have time and it seems overwhelming. But actually there's a couple of just core, maybe 5 or so big decisions that basically account for 80+% of your carbon footprint. So that's where the focus of your energy should be.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's I'm guessing top 2, ground transport and meat.
Yes. So the big, as an individual, the biggest things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint is, 1, move more towards a plant-based diet.
Right.
2, either get rid of your car, or if you can't get rid of your car, switch to an electric. There's just obviously massive benefits from moving to an electric car. And then the other big one, if you fly, is flying less.
Yeah.
So and then in the home, heat it. One is you could try and produce your own energy by installing solar panels. For a lot of people, that's not feasible. I live in a flat, I can't install a solar panel. And then the other one is especially in the UK, is heating. So insulation, and thinking about heating, and that gets you nearly all of the way there in terms of your carbon footprint.
Right. That is interesting, isn't it? Because that's it. I've just been we've just been discussing whether we should review yet another big, heavy electric SUV. I'm not going to mention the manufacturer because it just feels like, it looks amazing. It's a new one that hasn't come out yet, and we're going to go and see it. And it's but from what I can gather, what you're saying is, because I've got a real bee in my bonnet about big SUVs in cities.
Yeah.
I know I'm not alone in this. But, it's just the utter ridiculousness of it is just, it just seems to get worse. You just think, why? And people are still buying them Far more people buy large SUVs than buy electric vehicles. That's the horrible basic truth. And I'm talking combustion ones. So actually what you're saying is, what I'm taking from what you're saying is, it is worth us reviewing a big, heavy, new electric SUV because it's electric. So if the stupid idiots that were going to buy a petrol Range Rover or an Audi Q8 stupid 3-ton thing to drive one kid to school, it's actually better that they have an electric one still, even if it's a big tank. That's my argument. It doesn't really hold up very well.
Yeah, if someone's determined to get an SUV, then by far, but like, and that's the motivation, then they should get an electric one for sure.
Yeah. Because there's so many other topics, I just want to make sure. Yeah, there was one of your graphs I couldn't quite understand, which was global coal consumption, and I wrote it down. So coal produces 2,509 roughly terawatt hours a year. It says annual coal production, but it said changes. Have I got the graph here? I might need to read it to make sure, because I don't expect you to remember all these things. Where is that one? Because it was like a bar graph with annual. No, that was nuclear. Cool, there it is. So 2021 is as far as it goes up to. So the world annual change in coal energy consumption. Shown is the change in coal energy consumption relative to the previous year measured in terawatt hours. So it looks like it's a horrific increase from 2021, which looked like it was a huge decrease. I just got a bit confused about that one. I'm getting obsessed with one thing. It's probably a mistake, but
no. So so coal globally has gone up year by year and is still increasing. The big thing you need to be aware of there is that it's a COVID year. So basically that's showing you the change relative to the previous year. So the numbers for 2021 are showing you the change relative to the amount of coal we were burning in 2020. And our coal consumption fell a lot in 2020 because of COVID lockdowns, especially in China, for example.
Yeah.
So you see that almost half of the change or the increase came in China in that year.
Right.
So I think in general, I'm a little bit wary. So if you looked at the change from 2019 to 2020, you see a massive reduction. So the actual change, if we skip the COVID year, was much, much less. I think I'm very wary of using like just year to year changes for a lot of things because there's often a lot of noise. I think what you want to do is often look at, okay, how has it changed in the last 3 years, for example?
Right, or last 10 or whatever. Yeah. Because I mean, that is the actual amount of energy we use, because that's a really difficult one, isn't it? I make that mistake all the time, talking about energy when I'm actually when I mean electricity, because there's the vast amount of energy we use is not electricity. Am I right in that? It is presumably it's for heat and for industry, so it's gas and coal are the kind of massive quantities of energy that we produce for heat.
Yeah, so electricity is just a subset of energy more broadly. So I generally think about it in 3 buckets of energy. So one is electricity, the other's like heating and industry, and then the other one's transport, which is predominantly oil. And electricity is a small component. What I think people need to be a bit wary of, like I think it can be easy to get like very pessimistic when you look at the share of renewables, for example, in total energy consumption. Often looks very, very small. But what we're not including or not taking account of there is that a lot of the big fossil fuel chunk and transport and heating, for example, a lot of that is just waste.
Yes.
So it's not that. So say, how do I explain this? So say we look at our total energy production and it's 100 terawatt hours, let's just say. And renewables is only 10, for example. People assume, that renewables has to get all the way up to 100. And it doesn't need to get all the way up to 100. It's much, much less than that, because once you get rid of the fossil fuels, you basically get rid of the waste. And now fossil fuels, often that conversion process is, you're losing like 2/3 of it to heat. So actually the amount you get in the end is only 1/3. So the amount you do not need to scale renewables from 10 to 100. It's more like 10 to, 40, for example.
Right. I mean, there is a really good analogy with electric vehicles because, I grew up with combustion engines and was obsessed with them as a kid and as a young adult. And when I understood the efficiency, and that was with two engineers from Honda who were showing me this incredible 3-cylinder, the kind of the ultimate combustion engine. And it was running in a laboratory, and it's standing right next to it. It was just going, and of course, it had to have an exhaust pipe that went out of the room, otherwise we'd all die. But put that aside, they were so proud of this engine. It was this beautifully balanced engine that was 33% efficient, and that was like amazing. It was like it punched the air.
Mm-hmm.
Have a medal because it's 33% efficient. And I stood there looking at it and I going, well, what's the engine in my car, my Volkswagen Golf? Or how? And they went, like 26%. And I went, does that mean in literal terms, every pound or dollar I buy petrol for that I put in that car, that when only 25p moves me along? And they went, actually, it's probably a bit less that moves you along. And you then go, that is good. So 30, and then you look at an electric motor, which the rubbish sort of Victorian electric motor, about 80% efficient.
Yeah.
The modern ones are up in the 90s. And you go, so what that then equates to is, to replace the entire global energy fleet, we'd need this much energy, which is what we use now. Yeah. And you go, no, we don't.
No, we need way less than that.
We need about a third of what we use now.
Yeah.
Because a petrol car goes about 420 meters on a kilowatt hour. And I've got a Tesla, which is not a small car, but it's quite efficient, does 4.5 miles on a kilowatt hour. So that's the difference. It is colossal. And a good car, a proper efficient car, which is what we should be using, the Aptera in America, which is amazing, 7-8 miles to the kilowatt hour. That's what we should be aiming for.
Yeah, there's a interesting chart. I think it's on the US Environment Protection Agency website, I think. But they basically plot the average miles per gallon of different car manufacturers over time. And you see there's very small improvements. And then Tesla enters the chart and it's basically on another level. Yeah. This just way, way, way above. And of course they're doing, it's not the same of miles per gallon, but they do an equivalent.
No. Yeah.
And the reason that Tesla is just off the charts is because it only makes electric cars. So it's basically comparing what's the difference between a gasoline car and an electric car in terms of what you'd expect as a mile per gallon, and it's just completely off the chart. Yes.
What about the last thing I'd love to ask you about is recycling, because that's become it's critically important. So we've recently done an episode about how Apple are recycling their stuff they make, and they're now industrializing their recycling processes and refining them, because, and I didn't even know that they've got to, in the next 10 plus years, they've got to recycle 2.24 billion iPhones. That's how many they've sold. So in 10 years' time, that they'll all be pretty much redundant. But what they plan to do by 2025, this is what they've said, and they told us we can say it, and we said it in the episode, is that by 2025, all the cobalt they use, because they will still be using cobalt in their batteries, unlike cars, all the cobalt they use will be recycled. They will not extract any more cobalt ever for any of the products they make. And then they want to then step up to nickel, to chrome, to all the other products they can do, because they've made so many phones that they can actually produce them at that rate at the moment. I mean, they're already stripping out that stuff and using it in their new products now, but they're saying that by 2025, that will be 100% of the cobalt they use will be pre-dug up, that's going to have an impact. I mean, I can't imagine what impact that has, because it requires a lot of energy to recycle that material.
I mean, that's interesting. That's something to hold them to if they've claimed that by 2025 they'll do that.
I'm going to remind them.
The problem with recycling is I mean, there's probably some where the processes are not yet quite optimized or not really there, but for a lot of them the processes are there, it's technically possible to do. The problem basically just comes down to economics of often these minerals are so cheap to extract, often in some actually in a lot of cases because the social conditions and the supply chains are so poor. But they are very, very cheap to extract, and often the recycling process, because we've done it at very, very low volumes and we haven't got the scale, is very energy efficient and costly. So the economics are just not there to actually push companies to recycle, because they can do it way, way cheaper. It's just going to increase their costs.
Right.
But in terms of minerals, like I think a lot of people are concerned that we'll run out of a lot of the minerals that we'll need. Like there's no really indication of that.
No.
But recycling would go a long, long way. So I mean, it's only a positive. If big companies like this are making, I mean, that's ambitious. That seems very, very ambitious to me.
It does.
If they're making that claim, then that sounds very positive.
I mean, the only thing I can say is from being in the place, the kind of facility where they were doing this, and I mean that the machine we saw, which was going with iPhones that quickly, that can only do 2.5 million a year. So they've got another one in Austin, Texas, that can do another 2.5 million. They need them that can do like 20 million a year. Just to catch up. I mean, it's on a scale that, because they're such small items individually, so you then got to think, oh well, then that's, because what's the material in? There is like a micron of rare earth metals. I didn't know the thing that goes zzz in your phone is actually a rare earth metal in a tiny little tube. We saw it. It's like that. It's minute. And one of those is like you would sneeze and you'd never find it. But when you've got 20 million of them, that's a big lump. It's like lumps of gold and silver and nickel and cadmium, and it's huge amounts of materials, which is quite intriguing just to think, to scale it up to things like electric cars and buses and trucks.
Yeah.
Eventually, when you do have to, we've got to do something with it. We can't, the sort of Jeremy Clarkson term that was, which was in 3 years you'll throw this battery into landfill. He said that there's tens of thousands of people who still believe that.
Mm-hmm. But I think it could move quite quickly, and one reason for that is that we discussed earlier that one of the potential drivers away from fossil fuels is that this energy security component, and a lot of people have tried to push against that and say, well, you're still going to be relying on country X, like they always use China, because they produce or they extract and refine the minerals that they're going to need. So I think even partly at the company level, but also at the national level, there probably will be this push to recycle, because that almost gives you this like self-sustaining loop where you don't need to continually rely on countries that have the minerals to produce more. Like you basically want to be able to recycle your own stuff and then reproduce the same stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, just to kind of wind up, what are your predictions from the point of view of successful technologies? I mean, you've already kind of implied that wind and solar are fairly successful. What about things like energy storage? Because that is, all the sort of renewable maximalists, I'll call them, that I know, who I generally agree with, but I'm always there's a little bell going off in the back. I'm going, that's a lot, which is, and that is the sort of tripartite solar, wind, storage. Those three things. It makes sense. I can understand that on a very basic level, but the level of storage that we'd need, and then they talk about distributed storage and vehicle-to-grid systems and all that. And yes, it's still, there is an element of the Dunkelflaut, which is do you know that term, the German? No. It means it means 2 weeks of dark, cold, still weather. There's no sun, no wind, and it's horrible. It's a German winter, which we have as well. Das ist ein Dunkelflaut. Which is where renewables just collapse, and you go, how on earth are we going to keep going through that period? I'm
probably going to make the case nuclear could be very useful. I think nuclear and solar and wind alone don't go well together, because you can't ramp up nuclear. But with sufficient energy storage, like that mix can actually work. Like nuclear energy storage, solar and wind can feasibly work. Hydro's people just completely forget about hydro. Like hydro's our biggest renewable energy source.
Yes. That graph, sorry, just to quickly say, that graph about hydro, I didn't realize how way ahead that is of everything else. So there's a great graph over the last 40, 50 years where solar doesn't exist, wind barely exists. but there's a bit of hydro.
Yeah.
Even when I was a kid. So Dinorwig was built when I was a kid, and hydro dams were around, long before I was born. But then the hydro grows at such a rate, and then only more recently we've seen this really sharp increase in solar and wind. Sorry, yes, it's just that I'd forgotten that graph.
Yeah, so I think hydro's not growing super quickly, and I don't think it will grow at the rate that solar and wind will, because it's just not as scalable. But I think we should maintain a very large hydro supply and actually increase it in locations where it's suitable. And then, we're not going to get away from the fact that we just need very large energy storage, and we're going to need to build it at a scale and speed that we've just never done this before.
Yeah.
But I think it's feasible. I think in terms of, I'm not concerned about mineral requirements. Like, we have enough. There, the bottleneck is production capacity, like basically now.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, the price trends are all very much going in the right way. Like, the price of batteries has just like completely plummeted. And I expect will continue to get cheaper as these products develop. So, like, I think all of the trends are moving in the right direction, and I think it's possible. Right. Undeniably, it's a massive challenge that we haven't done before.
Challenge. Yeah.
But I think they are, like, I often get this, like, people often make the case of, my country's so small, it emits so little, like, what's even the point of it? Like, all of our, like, emission savings get dwarfed by, I don't know, 1 year of China's emissions.
Or America's energy consumption. Yeah.
But, like,
I just want to bring the Americans
countries
in on this.
Yeah. Throw them under the bus.
Yeah. But it's an electric bus.
So that's like a very common argument, but I think the key thing there is, like, even beyond the actual emissions reductions, we basically need completely new models of how to do things, and we need exemplars of how we do it. And any country can set the example of, this is actually how you decarbonize your electricity, and these are the combinations that work. And okay, yes, other countries might need to do it on an even larger scale, but, like, these are the combinations that work. Like, it is actually possible to do this. Yeah. And that's how I see also, like, for example, Norway with electric vehicles. No one knew that you could get basically all of your new sales of cars to be electric until Norway did it, and now no one can use the excuse that you can't do that. Yes. So I think there's, like, just loads of learning to be had, and small countries can even play a big role in there in setting an example of how to do it.
And I mean, I'm sure you would agree with this, that one of the things that keeps me going with this whole daft thing, the fully charged I'm talking about there, what the hell are you doing this at your age? You should be lying down in a corner doing a bit of gardening. But what is the excitement of the new technologies that are emerging, and not only the new technologies, new business systems, the software, the new way that things join together and talk to each other. There's a huge array of new ideas that have emerged in the last 10 years that they would have been inconceivable 20 years ago. I mean, the fact that this house now, there's a car behind me that's charging 100% from solar panels. Mm-hmm. I've done the whole stupid thing, gone the whole hog. So I'm 100% electric. We haven't used any grid electricity now for about 22 days, none at all. And we're 100% electric, cooking, heating, hot water, cars, everything. So it is not possible for the whole year, but it is, it's grossly unfair from a kind of macro socioeconomic point of view that someone in my position doesn't have to pay for electricity for about 6 months of the year, or petrol. So someone like you, who lives in a flat and has to use a car, so uses a petrol car, is spending way more to maintain that than I do. And that's clearly wrong.
It's clearly wrong, but it's also that the early adopters, so the people that adopt electric vehicles early, adopt solar panels early, they're making those technologies cheaper for the rest of the world. Yeah. And again, that's where, like, smaller countries can play a role if they invest in these technologies. They make it. I mean, we were talking earlier about people that literally have almost no energy at all because it's too expensive. And the point is that we just need to make these technologies really, really cheap, and the early adopters massively help in that.
But it does. I mean, I'm sorry, because I'm trying not to go over an hour, but it's because I'm afraid I could grill you with the really ridiculous questions for at least 4 hours, but I'm not going to do that. But it does give me a fingernail hold on the cliff of despair. Hope that you are essentially someone of your generation who's grown up in the world you've grown up in, which has been fairly challenging. Isn't completely pessimistic and is, can see that there is possibilities.
Yeah. And I think that the way I like to clarify that is it's not like some blind optimism or complacent. Like, it's definitely that I'm saying, hey, everything's fine. We can just let things continue. Like, it's actually the opposite. Like, because I see this stuff moving so quickly, it makes me more optimistic and driven to do more. I'm like, guys, look what we're doing. We can do this bigger. We can do it faster. If anything, the optimism for me drives more action rather than the pessimism, which almost like I kind of sit in despair. So for me, it's this very, very active, driven optimism.
Yeah. That is a beautiful note to end on, Hannah. Thank you so much. That was I can only apologise for my fluffy, rambling questions because you're very, very clear in your answers and your understanding. I can only feel a certain amount of shame.
No, I love the conversation. I loved it. Thank you.
Very good. No, it's been really good. Thank you. And please do. I need to talk to you again with far more structured questions.
I'm very happy to come back anytime.
Very good.
Thank you.
What an amazing young woman. That was an extraordinary privilege to talk to Hannah. She's fantastic. It is shocking. And I know I did mention that she's the same age as my son, which is incredible, really. Because I think it just puts it in perspective for me, that my son's childhood, to me, seems very recent. Therefore, I sort of imagine Dr. Hannah Ritchie as a little toddler running around the garden, not that long ago. And now she's this incredible, I don't know what you call it, disseminator of fascinating data. And the data analysis she does is amazing. Do go to Our World in Data. I'm just going to check now what the actual web address is, because I'll say it on here, but I definitely will put, what is it? Our World. Oh, it's just all one word, ourworldindata.org. If you go there, you'll see all the stuff they're doing. It's incredible. That's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.